Okay. Greetings. Welcome to Terra Prime Live. Darth Artemis coming to you from Terra Prime headquarters. Joining me here today also is our council member and fellow instructor, Ben Judkins. How you doing? Today, we are going to be talking about long weapons and sabering. So that is obviously going to bring up weapons like this. As I call it, the double-ended saber. Some people call it the Saber Staff. We'll get into why I don't call it the Saber Staff in a little bit. But yeah, so this is obviously one of these things that obviously comes up a whole lot. But we'll also be talking about different ways that you can create new and interesting configurations using certain, obviously, over-the-counter accoutrement. So we'll go into that and kind of show you all that. So, but I also want to go into what long weapons are, which ones they're out there, where you can look for these types of inspiration for that type of thing. So yes. So as we start out, I don't know, Ben, what do you think is probably the number one, I don't know, important thing that somebody should know if they want to get into, say, the Saber Staff or some looking into long weapons, and they've never touched one before? Anything come to mind there?
I think the piece of wisdom that you got to think about for anyone who's never touched one before, or even if you have played with these weapons before, is swords or lightsabers are analogs for swords, right? Basically we're using lightsabers to teach you sword stuff. The number one thing that you have to realize when we start talking about how swords interact with other types of weapons is that swords are sidearms, right? Contrary to what you see in the movies, battles were not won and lost with swords, right?
Very true.
Battles, however, were won and lost with spears. They were won and lost with like all kinds of, and pikes and halberds and all kinds of pole arms. And so the question really is, how do we understand these weapons in conversation with each other, right? The truth is you're really disadvantaged, if you have a sword and the other guy has a spear or a pike. And that's a beautiful thing, because if you begin to understand the logic of why that is, not only will it make you a better spearman or a pikeman, but it'll make you a better swordsman, right? As soon as you get down the essential lessons of geometry, range and distance and angles and stuff like that, that the pole weapons have to teach you, that's it, right? That's what makes you not just an effective soldier, but it'll make you a much, much more effective fencer as well.
Yes. So I have switched the camera here so I can get to a kind of demonstrating place. Hopefully this will work. Whoa. Outside with the insects. Let me try to move this to where I can see what's going on. Oh no. So it is threatening to rain here, which is why we've got all of this brouhaha going on. So, okay. So, yes, so long weapons, the geometry aspect is very good. Now, one thing that we've mentioned this before, if you follow the blog, I'm doing some translations of this. There was a Ming Dynasty author named Yu Dayu, who was a general in the army, and he wrote a book called Jianjing, which means sword treatise, except it's a treatise full of staff techniques. This has caused a lot of consternation over the years, but he kind of explains it. Well, he does explain it right in the book, where he calls learning the staff like learning your classics, or your, you know, in Western parlance, it would be like learning, you know, learning all of your literary classics so that you know where certain things have come from and all of that. The staff kind of fits that place for him. So that geometry aspect, where we're looking at the geometry of weapons and all of that, because a staff is long, right? It exaggerates those geometries, right? So if I'm holding it here, and you can, hopefully you can see that right in there, and I just move it an inch, right? An inch on my side becomes a very long way on that side, right? And I can do even more if I choke up on it, right? And such, right? That's going to obviously translate directly to swords and to fencing. Now, one thing that we should mention, though, is that when we're talking about long weapons, unless we're talking about a staff like this, or something else, more often than not, we're talking about weapons of war, right? Battles. So they're not going to be used in the same way that we use in a one-on-one kind of way. Now, we have some video of some people using them that way. And today, we use these weapons all the time this way. Back in the day, they probably used them that way to train, right? Train with certain people. But when they're being used, it's like Ben said, contrary to the movies, it becomes much more simple, much more, you know, direct to the point, and a more endurance game, trying to get there. Any hoot. So the staff, people call the Saber Staff, the double-edged saber, the Saber Staff. So let's start there. We've got a Saber Staff right here. We've got a staff like this. Now, I've got two 36-inch blades. That makes that a very long staff. However, if we look at how long a reach I can get with this weapon here, right? And I do the same with this weapon here, you can see a big kind of discrepancy, okay? While this entire weapon is longer than a stick, it is actually shorter, because it's actually two sabers that are stuck together. It's not a stick. Now, that means you can use some techniques that you use with a staff with this, but you cannot use all of them. Namely, you cannot go to either end of this particular thing. You must stay right in the middle, and you must stay right on the hilt. Depending on how big your hilt is, well, that's going to give you the real estate to do whatever you want to do. So the two weapons are not exactly alike. We can do some training from staff to get better at this, though. That's not necessarily a problem. The inherent issues with this that do not exist in staff, or even if we use blades, which I'll show you in a moment, is that lightsaber blades cut indiscriminately. Therefore, if I touch myself, which is common practice in stick forms, right? If I don't get it at the hilt, oops, I'm going to get myself. Now, people say, well, yeah, don't do that. You practice forms, so you don't do that. But in sparring, and unfortunately, Matthew is out today, so I can't demonstrate this in real time. But as I'm going like this, notice that if I go all the way past my center, I'm going to hit myself. So I either have to kind of exaggerate my turn, right? Or I have to give up a little bit of forward motion, or around motion so that I don't hit myself. I don't have full range of motion here, right? I can, of course, hit with this one and then immediately hit with this one. So that's an advantage, right? However, keeping track of these two blades, especially if they're this long, becomes a little bit more difficult, right?
And it seems like that's the real advantage here, right? When we're looking at the Saber Staff, I think people make a mistake when they think of it as a polearm at all. It's really a dual weapon. It's like Jar-Kai. You've got two blades in play at a time, but it's also kind of inherently short range, the way dual weapon fighting is usually a short range game.
Yes, absolutely. As you can see, if I want to get in, I can't even hold it out to its full extent right in my center. I have to be off to the side, right? I can't hold it here because I have this long blade, right? So I'm kind of limited in that fashion. Now, of course, I can go to either side. That's no problem, but that changes the geometry a little bit, right? Now, if we were able to shut off blades during action, then you've got a really dangerous weapon, right? Because you can mitigate that self-inflicted wound, and you can do full range motions by turning off the blade, going past you, and then going through again, right? But we can't do that. These are real. They exist in actual space, and they consist of matter. So we can't do that. Boom, boom. We're always going to kind of have to figure that out. Hence, we'll do this. Now, the other thing about it is whenever we're going to be talking about these, we're going to make this conceit that the hilt must be reinforced and be lightsaber resistant in some fashion. Because if it is not, oh my goodness, you are playing with fire, because again, the geometries of doing this, the hilt is one heck of a big target, and oftentimes it is the biggest target when the blades are in a position not to defend it. So keep that in mind when you go for this. All of these little limitations, I'm not a big fan of this weapon, as anybody who knows me probably is familiar. I usually call it the kayak paddle to the underworld. But you know, if you can make this this contraption work, good for you. So let me show you what weapon it is a little closer than a stick. That is something like this. All right. Now this is a modern weapon. It is not ancient or anything like that, and it is probably more performative in nature than it is an actual use. But the way you wield it would be very similar to that. You have two blades here, which can cut, right? Now, you could reverse this, so you could cut, boom, boom, boom. But that's the first difference. You can't cut in every plane of motion with this thing. So you still have to be thinking of edge alignment, all of that. Plus, you can, should, and do grab the blades and the entire weapon again. So even when you have sharp blades, such things can be that way. Again, the advantage of this, we have hand guards right here. If I'm holding it here like a sword, I have a hand guard there. This is short enough that I can hold this out in front of me here, right? So if I were ever to use a Saber Staff like that, I would probably put in like 24-inch blades and make them very, very short, because I'm going to be coming in close anyway. Might as well get in where it's a little less dangerous. But you have the hand guards here, which are, also a weapon that can come through. But the way that you would use something like this is probably far more analogous to the Saber Staff than an actual stick. Not that a stick, as I said, you should decry the stick. They say it's the grandfather of weapons because it all comes from there. Like we said, you learn the geometries with a stick. You can transfer them over to a sword, to whatever weapon that you might be interested in. Okay. Anything to add?
I think we're good so far. So what else do we have in universe that is, sorry, in the Star Wars universe, what else do we have that is, you know, analogous to a real world polearm?
Well, we've got those the energy spears. And then there's those the staffs that the guards use in
Right.
Revenge of the Sith,
Yes.
whatever those things are.
Yeah.
There's some sort of shock on either end. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you've seen, I have a couple of different, and I'll show you in a moment, different formations of putting double-ended things together. Having two small things on either end, very good. Again, as long as that shaft is lightsaber resistant, which I believe they were in the movie because they parried strikes and stuff. So
yeah,
there you go. And then there, I mean, I know there's lots of guards that have spear-like.
Right. Right. You know, and as you go back in time, as you go into ancient Jedi history, there does seem to be this thought that in the old Republic, you know, saber pikes, you know, like lightsaber like spear sort of weapons were much more common in those wars with the old Sith, which kind of makes sense because, again, you know, if you are serious about killing people in mass, you're probably going to go with something more like a spear. Yes.
Now, we should also make a distinction. I got this spear here. This is your typical wushu kung fu spear. When like most historical spear manuals and all that stuff that you see, again, are not this type of spear. They are for a very long, you know, at the very least 10-foot pole, right? And they are meant to be used in formation. They're very, very long, whatever. That being said, the modern qiang or spear, as they call it, is still a very good kind of weapon. If you think about this now, the way you use a spear like this, and if you were to use it against a sword, you would be using both the tip, the anchor here, and you would be using a bit of the shaft, right? Because you would try to knock that weapon around. Therefore, if you're trying to recreate a spear, I would not say don't just make this the lightsaber, but make the lightsaber probably there. Again, use a 24-inch. I'll show you a way to do that here. But that's because you want a little bit of play further down towards your hand so that you can affect parries and things with the end as they are kind of intended. You can also move sneak attacks and that kind of thing. So we'll give you a basic sequence of spear movements, which is common in Chinese spear here, right? And you start in a very wide kind of attack stance, but you're going to be in defensive position in our system with the right or the left foot forward if you're right-handed. We call it defense stance. It's sometimes called sword versus spear stance because of this. Generally speaking, the longer weapons are done in a reverse stance like this. So anyway, so you're holding it here. Keep your arms straight. You're going to extend forward, shift into your front stance, slide your hand up through, and hit. Now you want to do that kind of all together, but you want to kind of start with your hand. So like that. Okay. Now from there, you go back, bring it up over your head. Then you bring it down and then forward. Now you go boom, down, boom, up, down, there. Or you can go from here, down, up, down, there, right? Right? Pretty simple. You can do that with a stick. You can do that with pretty much anything. What that does is it kind of trains the basic movements of attack and protection that you can use with the spear. Now, with a spear, you have your edges, you have your flat, but it's a very small surface. Sometimes, obviously, they can be larger spearheads. But generally speaking, you don't try to parry with this bit right here. It can be done, but more than likely, what you're going to be doing is attacking with this. Now, you can attack either with the edges or with the tip. So I can, right, slice down with that. I can also flick up here, going with that edge to slice there. This red stuff there is just to show the movement, right? In reality, it's not really needed. No, it doesn't stop the blood from running down the shaft. I actually think that having a bunch of fur right here to catch the blood would make that worse. So not sure where that myth came from. But it's essentially a decorative type of thing in that way. That's a very good high percentage way to practice a long weapon that has a thrust on it. Like I said, you can practice it with a stick. You can also practice it with certain configurations. Lightsaber, which we could show you. Now that obviously shows the difference. You can't really do that with this, right? So our basic long weapon type of thing can't be done with this. What can usually be done with this is switching sides, right? And that's done with our fun spins, right? We love these spins, okay? Now, with a stick, it's a little bit different. I'll show you how the way I teach it. If you don't know how to do this, or if you can't do this well, follow along. This is a pretty good way to do it. You're gonna hold it here like this with both palms facing down, okay? You're gonna start by going here, bringing it here. Now, again, we're using a lightsaber, so don't let the blade touch you, but you can let the back of the saber touch you there, right? Then you're going to turn it underneath. Again, if your hilt is long enough that you can put your arm on it, good. If it is not, do not let it go that far, but just let it come up to here so it's straight across, okay? Then you're just going to turn to the side. Then you're going to unwind it once. Then you're going to unwind it second. You're going to do the same thing over here. Boom. Unwind, and then tuck it under. Twist, unwind, tuck it under. Twist, unwind, tuck it under. Okay. Now, once you get going good with that, you can start putting an arc in there. So where instead of stopping here and then going across, I continue as I go across, like that. Try to make sure that each blade crosses the center as you kind of do this, right? After that, it's there. So this can be a very good tool to learn your orbits and that kind of thing. So if I'm here and I'm doing this, right? If I just let go with one hand, I am doing the behind the backspin.
Yeah, and one of the things to realize about those orbits too is they're combination attacks, right? You're hitting with one blade, then the other blade, then you're following up again. I mean, and that's the real value of this weapon. That's why this can be a sneaky, interesting weapon, is the ability to kind of combine and pair up, you know, attack with the back blade, attack with the front blade, attack with the back blade, right? And so where I like the Saber Staff, and kind of where I see it in a good teaching curriculum, is if people are interested in Jar-Kai, if they want to fight with two blades at once, you teach them this first, because this makes you think about, you know, how you pair blades, right? It's just structurally built into the weapon. You have got to confront this question of, how do I build a combination attack?
It's also something that you want to do when you're thinking about combination attacks. I want to make this clear. We do not mean that this is a combination attack. Okay, you cannot do that. I mean, you cannot hit them and do this like flourishing out there and then use it as a, you know, lead up to a strike, right? But that's not going to be your combination. Why? They don't go through each other, right? So you're going to have to stop, right, and come through there. But what it does do is it makes you remember that this thing has two sides and there's two blades, right? So as I'm practicing orbits going around like this, right, it helps me figure out my combination attacks because I know how this thing moves in space. So when I come through here like this, let's say I'm attacking with this back blade, but it misses and this next one hits, right? My original intent may have been to come up like this and then come around like that. But if my first blade misses, my second blade makes contact, I then have to, right, make a new choice. Also, I get stuck in one of those places. I have to change the orientation of my saber. If I'm blocked on this side right here, boom, that one comes from that side. Same thing from above, from below, all of that. Having the two blades, we talk about the shicho a lot, right? 360 degrees of awareness. So I have my first blade, but I also have my second blade that I got to keep track of, right? So it helps my, as we said, it'll help your regular fencing too, because it helps me control my saber as one thing, right? I know that I have this, and even if I don't have a blade back there, I have another hand. Sometimes I have a little bit hanging off to strike with. If you then transfer over to swords, you have a pommel, all that kind of thing. So when this is like, if I'm coming through here, boom, boom, boom. Yeah, that's a really common way to attack, right? I'm going to come in here like this, hit you over this side, come over to this side, unwind there, right? And hopefully I've hit you by then. If I haven't hit you by then, I either have to bring it back to do that again on the other side, or I got to try something else, like come underneath, over the top, boom. And that's where your circles come in. As I'm circling like this, and I turn, right? The saber can't change direction. Only I can. But relative to me, it is changing direction, right? And then you can learn how to sort of just manipulate it in different types of ways, right? Will you be able to do that against another person? I doubt it. But, you know, training like that and training like we do, there's a big myth that there's a one-to-one relationship of what you train and what you do. And it is not the case. You do lots of stuff in training that you'll never do in real life. and such, you know, that way, for a variety of reasons, but this is one of them. Okay, so let's move into different pole weapons then. So now, pole weapons. Yeah.
One of my favorites.
Yes. This is a pudao. Pudao means simple saber. And I'm not positive where that comes from, but I have my suspicions that it just has to do with this shape of blade, because most sabers, regardless of the length of handle, that have this kind of shape of blade are called pudao. Now, this is used much differently. In military terms, this is considered a short weapon. And that is because you are meant to hold it somewhere around here, right? Sure, you can go out there, but the control aspect of this is much more tricky. Let me see if I can get enough of a target here that I can. Right, so if I'm here, this is about the sweet spot, right? And from there, you could do a pretty powerful chop, right? Oh, but sometimes, and this is the thing, if you see these crazy shapes in sabers, sometimes that is not a good thing, right? Because it will interfere with how you go through your cut in that way. But, oh, yep, same thing. I'm kind of out of it anyway. But anyway, you can see still a really, really deep cut, right? Went almost all the way through. These are harder to control than a sword, right? When you would use it, you will often choke up to right about here, right? And you're going to be using it in that way. Again, I don't know if I can get it going with this little target being so low, but I'll try, right? You can still get that cut there, but again, not quite as robust. If I then, go down here like this, this is more powerful, right? And I can move between these two positions fairly easily with this. So this is a really nice pole weapon. It's got the pole weapon aspect to it, which is the length of handle, all this. If you were wondering if this looks familiar, Star Wars fans, this is the weapon that the Praetorian Guards, one of them uses one of these. They just put a bunch of sci-fi stuff on it. But if you look at it, it's essentially one of these that is not at all altered. So, yes. So anyway, so that's the pudao there. And what I've done is created a lightsaber of, I don't know if you can see that. Nope. There. So this is about the same length, same ratio of handle to blade, about. Not perfect, but what happens when you do this is all of a sudden you have something that can act like a pudao and act like a spear, right? So it doesn't have a broad blade, so it doesn't have a directional cutting thing. So you're free to use your spear, right? That kind of thing. You're also free to use your pudao, right? Or glaive or bill or whatever type of that weapon you have. There's thousands of permutations of that weapon. You know, basically a sword on a stick, right? It doesn't take a genius to go, huh, wouldn't it be great if my sword handle was really long like a stick? But there you go. So as far as long weapons and sabering goes, this is what I actually use. So I use most of my pole arm stuff that I transfer over to lightsaber. This is the beast that I use. Sometimes I will put another saber on this end, swap these out for really short sabers. But otherwise, most of what I do, I can do with this, with a little bit of alteration. So if let's see, I do stuff like that, right? I just have to make sure that this blade stays forward and is the business end, as it were. Right. Okay. Okay, so how are we doing out there?
Okay, Chad. So if someone has never thought about fighting with a pole arm before, but they are familiar with our teaching material, say, they've seen their CHO, how do you start? How do you get going?
Well, it depends on what you're going to do with it, right? If you're just doing it to train, and let's say you're picking up the most common, which is the double-ended lightsaber. What should we call this? A light pike?
Yeah, let's call that the pike.
We'll call this the pike. All right. So we'll take the double-ended saber here. That exercise that I showed you here, obviously, great place to start. There. The other thing you should do is do shicho, whether it be the dual-on, whether it be the exercises, the accelerations, or anything like that, but do it with this, keeping in mind that you have this. So if I'm doing honor sash, right, I'm doing stuff like that, right? Okay, I want to do cho, right? I can do cho. Okay, this is going to teach you a couple of things. Number one, make sure that that blade crosses all the way to the other side of your body every time. Like I said, because this blade is over here, it's easy to stop right there to where you're going to be doing stuff like this. Okay? Make sure it goes all the way over to there. This motion, connecting both of your arms like this, is going to give you that really good core type of power behind any of your strikes, even when you're using just a regular saber.
And that's one of the reasons that we really should, as martial artists, I think about training with pole arms, because they force a degree of consciousness of our full body coordination and strength training that sometimes we overlook. Like, a 3-meter pole is as good as a home weight set, as far as I'm concerned, right? There's a lot you can do in terms of strength and coordination training with a pole.
Oh, absolutely. One of the most common things in Chinese martial arts is the reason that these weapons exist in our systems right now is really not very related to weapons being used in fighting, right?
I'm not going to get jumped in a dark alley by a guy with a 15-foot pike.
Yeah, nope. Nor you wouldn't have, even in the Republican era of China, when most of the stuff was being set upon. The reason these weapons are in these systems is, in the beginning, it may be people coming back from service in the armed forces, right? And they have these ideas, and they have these things that they can now share with everybody, and that probably accounts for some of them. But the stuff that we practice now and the stuff that leads into wushu, right, is really a kind of theatrical interpretation of that stuff, right? It's not necessarily real. Now, it can be used for demonstration, and it is often used as demonstration, but more often than not in Kung Fu systems, weapons are used to train specific body mechanics. And long poles, which are used in Taiji, they're used in Wing Chun. One of these things that they train, whether it be intuitively or explicitly, is kind of, it's expressed in something called stick shaking. And it's a core exercise that we use here. If you have ever seen a body blade, these particular things are kind of go on the same premise, except it's not as difficult. I'll use the spear here because I don't have anything quite long enough. But basically, you hold the stick out like this. You don't use your arms. You just use your core, and you make little motions. And you get the end moving a lot. So, right? So it's not this, but just really, really, really small, that kind of thing. That is where like Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch comes from. And any of these things where you see somebody like push somebody and they go across the room, right? Nothing magical, just physics, right? They make themselves instantly like a rock, and then the energy goes into them. When you see people get thrown across the room, that's also a little bit of an illusion, because most of the time what happens is they just get knocked off balance, and then they have to take many steps to regain that balance, and there are often obstacles of which they trip over. I know one time I did a class where I did that to somebody, and just pushed him, didn't appear to move very, very little. He went all the way across the room and hit this divider that was in between our rooms and made a huge boom. And everybody in the audience was suitably impressed, right? But it was just because he tripped, right? If he hadn't tripped, he would have just went boom, oh. Anyway, so yes, so that's thing. That's something that to use, and I don't have a large pole here, but you do that in the Wing Chun too, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have all kinds of specific movements that are meant for strength training and flexibility training, and then kind of dexterity, coordination. How do I keep my top and bottom together? How do I separate my top and bottom? All those sorts of things you got to think about. And the extreme length of these weapons makes it really easy to see if you're doing it or not doing it. You can cheat a lot just with yourself and your trainer, but you put a 10-foot pole in your hand and suddenly everybody can see whether you're doing it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we said, it just takes all of those physics and stuff like that and makes them much bigger. So it makes the angles bigger. It makes the the forces bigger. Okay, let's see what we got here on the chat. We've kind of somebody recognized the cicada wing. The batleth. Yes, the batleth is similar to this.
And we love them.
Yes, we do love batleths. We're working on the batleth. I'm not going to give up on the batleth. It's too fun. It's too cool. Like we said, not every right now, I'm like half of these weapons, like the cicada wing, right? I'm willing to bet that if this was used against anybody, it was used against somebody who had no weapon. Right? Otherwise, it's probably just an intimidation tactic, right? You get this thing, you show up for your protection money holding this thing, right? People's wallets get pretty light. So go figure. But yeah, bat like that, another ceremonial weapon, pretty cool. Kang Snow says hello. Any advantage or disadvantage considering having or longer pike handle? Okay, so the length of the handle, that's a good question. When you're dealing with like just you and another person, you don't want it too long, obviously, because all that person has to do is get past the business end and then you're there. That's where these things came in. And again, another thing, I'm fairly confident that this type of spear is not actually from spears. It's actually from spears in opera or plays, right? Like a stage spear, because again, they were much longer than this, even kind of like personal spears like that. But if you were to use this, now there are other weapons like this, like the javelin, right? But it would have an end here, and it was usually used with a shield, right? And you could throw it and stuff like that. So this is very similar to that. But the reason we use these now, right, is because of that. We can bring it in this quick, right? So if somebody passes my spear tip, I can bring it in and hopefully bring it forward again at them. If you're dealing with something that's 3 meters long, right, good luck. That's where the sidearm comes in, right? And most of the time, if the spearmen were breached, right, spears would be dropped and swords would be drawn, right? So,
and again, you got to remember, when people are actually fighting with this, it's not a spearman, it's a rank of them. Everyone defending the guy who sits to the right of you, and there's 3 other spearmen behind you, right? So it's a very different mindset when you start to think about what is going on with those, 10 meter, maybe even 15 meter long weapons.
No, I don't think they're 15 meters.
Oh, sorry, 10 feet, 15 foot, right? Yeah, I switched my unit.
3 to 5 meters.
Yeah, exactly.
3, yeah, and that's true, right? 3 to 5 meters is what these spears were. They're not this. They were lowered down, and you used very simple, those same motions, but you use them very, very large, right there. And again, that's. I mean, we don't do that anymore. Those have kind of gone out of it. Now
except in Southern Kung Fu, we've taken the tip off, but we use the poles.
Sure, you can still use the poles and all that. And actually, I've heard the same thing said about Tai Chi stick, that it's just a spear with the head taken off.
Oh, Xingyi, right? This is what the Xingyi guys are always saying about their pole.
Yes. So they're, well, yeah, and Xingyi is ostensibly supposed to come from a spear style.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely lends itself to that type of thing. You have the same type of linear movement. Now, if you are, the question was, is there a advantage or disadvantage to length of handle? Now, of course, again, we are making the conceit that your handle, whatever its length, is lightsaber resistant. So you make that call on your own. If you do not have a lightsaber resistant hilt, right, or you don't accommodate for that, then obviously the shorter that is, the better. So where Exar Kun's was basically like one saber with 2 sides, it wasn't 2 sabers stuck together, that would probably be your best bet. However, totally different thing. When you're talking about usage, like I said, because we're dealing mostly with dueling and all that kind of stuff, we don't have to worry about enormously long weapons. We can stick with Pudao sized weapons. Like I said, this type of blade to stick ratio for me provides me enough surface up here to perform my parries and manipulations, and still gives me enough to get that reach to make this weapon worthwhile, right? This is put together in this way. I have one Dominic's V3 or whatever it is from Ultra Sabers. And then I have a coupler, not the internal coupler, it's an external coupler. So this piece is another piece. I'll come up closer. This piece is another piece. Then these are two staff extensions. So they pull apart there. Okay. So you can even play with that type of thing, right? Making the blade too long is definitely going to be something you want to avoid, because the polycarbonate bends quite significantly as it gets longer, for obvious reasons. This can give you, let's say if you're going through there and our doing thing is Makashi, right? Here are your moon guards as, right, performed with a stick. Okay, so you have to, you can go through those types of things with a longer handle. The Saber Staff, or the double-ended saber, like I said, I would treat that more as a training tool, but hey, in that case, longer is better. Shorter blades, you don't need those if you got a resistant hilt or whatever. Those blades are going to do that, and you want enough play that you can do your manipulations underneath your armpit so that you can get the body rolls, right? You can even go around your neck like that. Woo, yeah. Rock star stuff. Because that's why we like them, right?
Absolutely. Speaking of how awesome they are, should we take a few minutes to talk about some basic safety considerations and pole arms? Because these are really long levers, right? They generate an immense amount of force. So you don't want to spar without safety gear with these ever, because like you will mess somebody up.
Yes.
And even with safety gear.
Yeah. Also, they tend to be heavier because the shafts of these things tend to be metal, usually aluminum, and they have all of this kind of like, figuring on top of them. So there's a lot of metal here. These tend to be heavier than pretty much anything. In fact, believe it or not, these two weapons are far closer in weight than you would think, right? I think there's only probably less than a pound difference in these two things, right? And this thing is steel, wood, and this is just aluminum and polycarbonate, right? So you're adding a lot of stuff to this. Also, if you're new at any of this stuff, you're going to have to rearrange everything. You're going to have to figure out how far is far, how close is close, and do that. So I would recommend, beyond just obviously the safety gear, and if you're using the long weapons, always use as much safety gear as you can, because it does not take a lot of things. Again, we always say this. These are the weapons are labor-saving devices. So the better or more sophisticated they are, the less you have to do more damage.
Yeah.
And long weapons are definitely no exception to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend, at Ithaca Sabers, we would practice with saber pikes. We would do solo stuff with them. I would not let in the class people spar with them. I would say if you are going to spar with something like a saber pike, you don't want to use lacrosse gloves. It's time to go for HEMA, hard shell, finger protected gloves. You need to have solid gorgets. You need to have back of head protection with your fencing mask. You need all of it. For God's sake, protect your knees and elbows.
Very true. All right. Let's see what else we got here. The Yong Chung Longun Dragon Pole. Training advantage to training it. It's training Makashi with a Pudao saber. No, I don't think there is one. I was just making the point that you can.
It's an interesting exercise. Like if you don't have a Pudao, get yourself a long stick. Get a stick that's longer than you're used to, right? If your Sicho saber has a 36-inch blade, get something that's 6 inches longer than your saber and try to do Sicho with it. And look what happens to your hands. Look what happens to how you start to move that stick around. And you can really do that with any of your forms, I think, and it will begin to give you a feel for what goes on with pole arms. You just keep making that stick a little bit longer, and you already know the basics with Sicho.
Yep, very true. All very true. Okay, so let's see. Anything else? No, I don't see anything out there. We're kind of coming to the end here. So those two things that I showed earlier on, right? You've got your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. You can do that. Also, right? Thrust back or thrust down, up, down, back. Right? Right? Those two things will get you a long way, surprisingly. I mean, that's the thing. People used to have to learn this stuff very quickly, right? So the stuff that works generally is low-hanging fruit. That's what makes a lot of this stuff so difficult, because there's a certain amount of it that does come intuitively to some people, but then as you get in deeper, you will eventually get to a point where none of it is intuitive. And long weapons are one of these things that we're just not used to moving around with. So it's something to keep in mind. Okay, do we have anything else? I don't think so. Okay. Well, so I guess that's it for us tonight. Gone through a couple of the, issues with long weapons. Obviously, people are coming up with different types of rule sets and ways to incorporate them as much as we can, because we want to try to be able to do all of this stuff with every type of weapon we can think of. So there you go. So there's going to be a lot of stuff. The Saber Staff, of course, is its own weapon. Kind of see it as that. I personally see it more as a training tool, not as a very, optimal weapon. Even the cicada wing, I don't think is. If that was in a weapon, if I was going into a duel and that was one of the weapons to choose, no way. there's no way I'm choosing that weapon. Just give me a regular sword. I can handle that. But anyway, so since most people are doing dueling, you're going to be dueling with these types of lengths of weapon, not the really, really long ones. So keep that in mind as you look into certain techniques, that some of them may be applicable, some of them may not be. Do them all, because it has a good fitness component to it. It gets you, into the movements and can help everything about your game. So, all right. Okay. Is that all we got there? All right. Well, we will, let me come down here so I don't have to, I don't sign off with my ass in the air. So anyway, so there we go. We've got some stuff on the table. We'll probably be putting out some tutorials and that kind of thing with Saber Staff and long saber weapons. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, so thank you, Ben, for joining the conversation. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for your comments and questions. Yeah, if you have any other questions, come visit us on Facebook, see our forum, like, share, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff. Help us out. Anyway, we'll see you later. Patience, practice, perseverance. Happy sabering. Okay.